Hi, everybody. Welcome to another session of Make It Myself, an independent artist forum. As you're aware, I have already done about 6 sessions and it's been extremely interesting. So many different people, so many different faces, and something that I started from just an idea is really gaining so much momentum. I think what's exciting is today's session because I've got some amazing professionals who have spent years in this industry and they really have a lot to add and share and hopefully give direction to a lot of artists, which is something which is very required today. So I'll not waste any more time. And I'd like to first introduce because ladies first. And so Nirmika Singh. Hi, Nirmika. How are you doing?
Hi, Somini. Thank you so much for having me today. And I'm doing
Most
well.
well. Yes, thank you so much. As everybody knows, Nirmika is the executive editor of Rolling Stone India. But a lot of people, I'm sure, also know that she's an artist in her own, steam, and we'll of course talk about it. Besides Nirmika, we've got two really amazing gentlemen, and I'm really proud that they agreed to come here. To start with, we have Amit Gurbaxani. Hi,
Hi,
how are you?
good. Thank you so much for arranging this because, like I said, it's just so rare that you get to sort of talk to other music writers and editors.
Yeah,
Yeah. This is a rare
yeah, no,
occasion.
Hey, Amit.
absolutely. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much. And we also have one more guest, as you know. He is Vishwa Deepak Dikshit. Hi, Vishwa. I don't know
Hi,
if I call you Vishwa,
Somni.
should I call you Deepak?
Oh, you can call me Deepak. That should be fine. That's the
Okay.
easiest one. Hi,
Right.
everyone.
And hi. So
Hi.
Deepak is the founder of a magazine that is, as he described it to me, it's dedicated to the independent space, and hence he really had a reason to be here. And the platform magazine is called Music Culture. Uh, Amit Gurbaxani, of course, everybody knows is a journalist, and he's a spoken journalist, so he has a lot to say. And I thought this was the time to get him here. So before we start talking, I'd really like each one of you to just give a little background of yourself, and we can start with you, Nirmika.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't see this coming. Sometimes I'm at a loss for words because I'm like, where do I begin? Wow. I don't know where to begin from, but I've started my career in music journalism about almost a decade ago. With Indian Express, I worked at Hindustan Times before I joined Rolling Stone India. And while I've been a music journalist almost my entire journalistic life, I've also been an artist. So I've been a singer-songwriter. Now I am primarily a songwriter and a poet, and I have my own, poetry series. And of course, I run my magazine, and also going to be a entrepreneur real soon. So looking forward to this new part of my life. Yeah.
Wow, wow. So Atmanirbharta in full swing there.
Always.
All right, Amit. Just a brief background of what you've been doing all your life.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I've been a music journalist for about like two decades, almost exactly now, a little over 2 decades. And I sort of started off sort of going back to like the old days of the music magazine. There was a magazine called The Record, and I sort of started my career sort of there.
Right.
And then I have been part of a lot of sort of hyper local publications. Incidentally, hyper local independent publications like Time Out magazine.
Right.
I was a music editor there for a long time. That was like, I think that really sort of helped shape my career. And then I wanted to like work with a couple of other hyper local websites, including my own, which sort of briefly ran for a couple of years, called the Daily Pow, which is sort of still around only
Okay.
in the guise of doing daily gig listings. So I'm keeping sort of the
Okay.
music flag flying high over there. And so I've been a
Wow.
freelancer now for about like a couple of about 3 years, a full-time freelancer. And I've sort of pivoted from being like an artist, sort of centric and release-centric journalist to sort of becoming one that's sort of more following industry trends and following more the business side of music, because that has really exploded, I think, in the past few years.
Yeah. Some of no, I like the way on Twitter you are so vocal about your points of view, and I think it's good because people like us who are in the industry, we also need to be constantly reminded of what the others are doing and what's happening, because there's so much of information out there. So we will continue talking, obviously, Amit, but Deepak wanted to also get a brief background of your journey in life so far.
Okay, so I've been in the industry for almost 5 years, almost half of what Amit probably and Nirmika has been into. So half the experience. But I started a company by the name Music Culture as an artist management company in the independent space, and gradually we realized that back in 2015, and we realized that there is a lot of scope for something to be done to increase the visibility for the artists in this particular segment. And that's how Music Culture as a magazine was born. And from there on, 2017 was the first edition that came up. And from there on, 3 years, we have been into this publication. And that's how our journey has been. And that's pretty brief of what we have done so far.
So it's interesting, like you said, you started a magazine because you believed that there needed to be some entity who would create enough, visibility for the independent space. How do you define independent space? I mean, there was a time where people only said Bollywood, and that's it, and everything else was bundled into non-Bollywood. But how do each one of you define the term independent space? And I leave it as an open forum.
I can sort of, this is something that I have grappled with a lot, and I've even sort of written about this. I have one of the most regular things I do is I have a column with first posts, and I sort of try and talk about different things. And I really sort of, because, the definition of independent is it's like open to interpretation. Everybody has their own answer. Like you said, I mean, for some people, it's just simply everything outside of Bollywood is considered independent. But that's a really simplistic definition. Then you have like the traditional definition of whether it's anything that's not on a major label that's like, not independent. And some people will even go as far as to say that if it's not associated with any sort of major company, whether it's a streaming service or, any sort of, or a brand or something, anything outside of that. And I think that as the music industry has evolved, really, I don't know whether you can even call somebody a completely independent artist. Because to me, independent artist is really, what is indie? It's almost like an aesthetic. It's almost something that you just know it when you hear it, And so in that sense, I feel that like sometimes if something's super commercial, then maybe, that's not indie. But like, can the same artist have two separate, types of releases? Like, for instance, like you take somebody like Anyway, right? And like who has this, probably one of the biggest independent artists in the country, one would say. But like, would you say his biggest song Machayenge is a very sort of commercial pop sounding hit, and he literally had a sequel to that because it was so, and that did both those songs. They sit very much outside of the rest of his repertoire, which is more sort of more traditional hip hop, in the more traditional hip hop rap space. So like maybe today we really should be looking at independent releases rather than independent artists. When we're talking about the independence.
Right. Yeah. What do you think, Nirmika? You've been an artist doing your own thing. When you were a part of a band, and I know that you did release some content there as well. How did you look at yourself? Were you just an artist trying to do your thing, or did you believe you were trying to build an industry in your own form?
Wow. So, of course, my experience has been very layered, right? And, in whatever capacity I was, whatever was my primary capacity in the form. Like Amit mentioned, this is a question that has, I'll say it in jest, has been, been discussed since time immemorial. Everyone's talking about what indie actually means. Of course, there is back in the day, in the 90s, we spoke of an indie sound. Now we talk about releases, and even in the releases space, like, Amit articulated, you have releases that sound like Bollywood, but they're independently released. There's so many labels that are, or initiatives that are backed by major labels that claim to be independent, but how independent are they really is a question,
Right.
I mean, that we've been
Right.
discussing for a very long time. In my own experience, while, when I did release the one EP I did 4 years ago, that was a pure DIY project. And I think a lot of us associate or interchangeably use DIY for indie. It's everything's done from, the word go by yourself.
Right.
You're reaching out yourself. You probably don't even have your own, have a publicist or a distribution agency. You're really reaching out to everyone independently. So that's what it meant maybe even 3 or 4 years ago. I think the definitions changed completely.
Completely. Yeah.
The term itself could be invalid now, right? Like I could question it on so many levels, whether the sound is independent, the artist has been formally independent. A lot of people who have had the backing of labels, previously choose to do stuff independently. How independent are
Mm.
they? Now I'm hearing of rappers who are collaborating with brands to release their albums. How independent are they now if they're getting money not from a label, not from say even an indie label, but from a brand? So I think the definitions change, but I think as journalists, as curators, we still associate
Yeah.
the term indie with a very authentic, original, creative sound. So if I were to reduce it to that definition, that will be a marker for me, and not the other frills, which of course keep changing as the context changes.
Yeah. But Deepak, how would you define it? I mean, you've actually created a magazine wanting to dedicate it to the independent space. So where do you decide, okay, this, is worth following or capturing or covering? What's your definition?
Okay, so my definition is, relatively more circumstantial rather than coming from a certain viewpoint. For me, independent is something which is more authentic. Of course, it has to be authentic. There is a creative freedom to the work that has been done, and it may or may not have commercial aspect to it. I mean, for me, a non-filmy also comes as a part and parcel of independent music till the time it as I said earlier, it is authentic and it comes from a very genuine background. Now,
Hmm.
the point to understand here, what we try to capture is anything and everything which is non-Bollywood. Now, why anything and everything non-Bollywood is independent music as a definition has evolved over a period of time, and the guys who are now working in independent music segment are also making music which has to be commercially viable. A lot of
Right.
labels are coming up. A lot of labels are coming up with a certain. They call it non-film category, but it technically hinges around independent music. And for
Right.
me, independent music is a very very broad category, which for me will essentially capture everything and anything which is non-Bollywood as it exists in India. So that's how I define it. I mean, it's very personal.
Right.
It's very subjective, but that's how I would like to look at independent music per se.
Right. I think in one sense, I mean, when we talk about the fact that Bollywood is commercial and independent music isn't, uh, in one sense, I mean, I would imagine, especially the kind of times we are in today, it is important for an artist to not look at it as, am I doing commercial music or I'm not? Because if your music is not making money for you, then seriously, it's a scary thing to do, right? I mean, what are you in it for? So I mean, I would like to step back a bit because, even our topic is about yesterday, today, tomorrow. And when we talk about, the independent space in the late 90s, and everybody says, oh, we don't have the Alishas and the Shans and the Daler Mehndis now. What do you think was, the reason why we had such big hits? And these were artists who weren't, behind Shah Rukh Khan's face or Salman Khan's face. They were their own face, and they were popular and they had fan followings. I remember doing Channel V live with these artists, having like 30, 40,000 coming and watching them. What do you think made it happen then, and why is it such a struggle now?
Uh, if I can
Hmm.
answer this,
Sure.
okay. So when I look back at 90s independent music, and I can probably compare it to the music that if we go categorically Bollywood and independent in 90s as when it originated. So If you go back to classics of Bollywood, which were in 70s, 80s, late 60s, those are still considered more authentic over what exists now. I think similar
Hmm.
journey has taken place in independent music also. The
Hmm.
ones that came early, they they have more lasting impact because of the source they were coming from. It was authentic. It was
Hmm.
it came from from a particular viewpoint and soul. There was no commercial aspect attached to it when it started. Over a period of time, it
Hmm.
has become commercial. I mean, over a period of time, it has actually, the focus is to earn money, and focus is to, of course, I don't say it's right or wrong, but the focus has changed, and you can see the same story in Bollywood as well. The ones
But Deepak,
used,
if you, sorry to interrupt you here, but if you think about it, I mean, some of the artists who made really big hits with their first albums, when they were taken on by bigger labels, they actually didn't end up having such big hits. I mean, take an example of Lucky Ali. Suno was such a big album, but when he went into, when another label took him on with the intention of pumping in more money, I don't know whether they actually landed up doing justice to that artist in their content. Even Adnan
that's,
Sami, for that matter, Kabhi To Nazar Milao was so huge.
yeah,
Uh, you don't really remember the later songs that he did. So I mean, the question here is, I mean, you talk about authenticity. I'm sure someone like Nirmika sitting here, who is today's artist, will say, "Hey, I'm as authentic." I mean, what do you
I
think,
think it's
Nirmika?
more authentic than the rest of those guys because those guys had machines behind them. I mean, they had entire
Absolutely.
teams. Like what she said, that it's DIY, and I think that's such a key word that indie artists today are doing DIY, and yeah, I mean. I'd sort of take a different point of view. I think the reason those artists became as huge as they were, because you have to remember they had a backing. They made music videos. Music videos are not cheap. They obviously had some financial backing behind them, which they had. They were
Hmm.
signed to labels, and we talk about
Hmm.
the traditional definition of an independent artist being somebody who's not signed to a label. Because you did have the
Hmm.
traditional indie acts also back then, right? Somebody like Rock Machine, who then went on to become industry. So you have to. I mean, I'd say Rock Machine was an indie act. These other guys were all indie pop acts, and
yeah,
and really, how did they become so big? I mean, simple two words: music television. They had one of the largest ways to go into millions of homes, and there
Yeah.
were no gigs were not happening at the scale that they are right now. Neither we didn't. I don't think we even had like FM radio back then, right? Like we had like music TV was like the main
Yeah.
way that they,
FM, yeah.
these guys got their music out there, and it reached across India. I was in school in Dubai at the time, and but I knew all of these artists because I'd watched MTV and I'd watched Channel V. So the power of
Right.
that medium is essentially
Right.
what made those guys so huge. I wouldn't really attribute it so much to the music, and I think that it's arguable to say whether them the rest of the music didn't do that well because we don't know. I mean, I don't know what the sales figures are because and I talk about this all the time how we get some little data, but I wouldn't be surprised if Adnan Sami's next album actually sold more than Kabhi To Nazar Milao. And remember, that was also with Asha Bhosle. So there was a Bollywood connect over there. And I think that also when you look at that, you're also looking at the fact that he became so much bigger that every other video for his album, I think Tera Chehra or something like that, the marketing for that album was that he got a Bollywood actress to star in a
Bollywood.
video with every
Yeah.
song. So it was
Yeah.
Rani Mukhija, I don't remember who some of the others were, but it was literally so that was the time. I think what immediately happened in the following years was this cannibalization of the indie pop scene by Bollywood. So I think that's why
Yeah.
you feel when you look at in hindsight, it seems like it's not that memorable. But
Hmm.
I mean, Alisha Chennai had Kajare after Made in India. People may not uh, talk about you know uh, associate her with that song so strongly, but she was the singer of that song, and the fact is that that song has probably, if you ask the average Indian across in every sort of corner of the country, have you heard Kajare or have you heard Made in India? I'm sure they know her more because of Kajare, right? I mean, they've heard Kajare more. I mean, whether it's
Not really. No, no, no,
Hmm.
not really. In fact, Alicia would be. Kajrare would be known by Aishwarya. They will not
Yeah,
know
that's
it
what
as
I'm
Alisha
saying.
at
So
all.
not Alisha, but
Yeah.
like the song itself, maybe not the artist, but the song
Yeah,
itself. She's
of
the
course,
singer.
of course.
I mean, there
Yes,
would
of
be
course.
no Kajare without her, without what she did for that song, right? I mean,
Right.
so I think that
No,
that's
but
such a
I think right. So, I mean, if you think about it, television is still existing. It's not that, I mean, we've seen the number of channels, but the reality of the situation is that while TV played a big role in making, indie pop artists literally household names, those
yeah.
same TV channels are not able to do it today.
Yeah, because do
You
you
know,
remember when at some point we lost Deepak, I think.
yeah, we seem to have lost Deepak. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but
I
do you
think,
remember
yeah.
there was a time in the 1990s that I distinctly remember this feeling really depressed that day when MTV
Right.
went from like a music, when turned into a Bollywood channel. And
Yeah.
that was like a turning point because, up until then you saw all the, and it was like an, you had all these guys, like for we consumed as like kids and 90s kids, we consumed this music, we consumed the international stuff and we consumed the indie pop stuff, together.
Yeah.
It was, we didn't make too much of a distinction, but Bollywood was still separate because it had its own sonic template and a very sort of
Yeah.
typical
Yeah.
style, right? So,
Yeah.
so it was a bit like, so we not only lost the international stuff when MTV turned into a Bollywood channel, we also lost the indie pop stuff to an extent, right? Because then
Correct.
the amount of airtime that these songs got just drastically changed.
Correct. Yeah. What do
Right.
you think, Nirmika? What's your point of view here?
If I were to use just one word, now Amit, of course, gave us a lovely overview. If I were to use just one word, he's been saying machinery. I believe that there was a great big machinery. There was A&R back in the 90s, which we lack today. Music labels had a team of A&R professionals. And the wonderful work that Atul sir has done over the, past few decades. The artistry was crafted.
Mm.
And let's not forget, the music was beautiful. The one song that comes to mind is when I remember
Mm.
how amazing the lyrics of the Shankar Mahadevan song Breathless was, right? So the partnerships were
Right.
very well crafted. There was a very clear agenda, and there were labels, right? When I say labels, not music labels. Of course, there were music labels, but there were labels to what the artist wanted out of their artistry. You knew that, say. And Anamika was a girl. She was going for the bubbly, cute girl vibe. You knew that Shankar
Yeah.
was pitching himself
Yeah.
as a cutting-edge futuristic artist. You knew that when Dhoom Pichakkum started, they were really going for the Hind rock label, and I remember being very
Right.
fascinated by it. When I saw it on TV. So people
Right.
were people. Right now I know that being genre bending and being absolutely genre agnostic is the thing, and people hate labels. But back then, it just helped us process so much, new music. You knew that there was a, and coupled with the economic liberalization and the fact that we had MTV in '91 and then again in '96 when they returned with like a lot more localized content and Channel V. There was so much happening at the same time. Everything was so well crafted, and all thanks to the TV being such a big platform, but also college shows. I think a lot of the indie acts
Yeah.
derived this sort of mass popular status because of college shows. So it was
Yeah.
definitely the
Yeah.
distribution angle. I remember the promotional rounds that they would do right at Planet M's or
Yeah.
at a lot of these audio stores. So the distribution was really amazing. And I remember I was 12 or 13 when a friend of mine was in a band as a session musician, and I remember being very fascinated by the entire marketing strategy that they would lay down. You remember seeing those ads. You remember Archie's music being so big, or BMG or Magna Sound. So there was
Right.
A&R in all its glory, and of course the platform. So yeah, I think that was the machinery. So we don't have it right now. Yeah.
But having said that, we believe that those were the days and these are not the days. But we still suddenly are seeing so much of boom or multiple players coming in. There's of course like Hangama Artist Allowed started in 2010 only for independent, and then we started having TuneCore and CD Baby setting into India. We had OK Listen. I mean, we have rather all of these guys. And then we also had a few others who came. There was Song You. I haven't heard much from them, but I know that they're around. And multiple players are trying to do their things. Uh, what do you think is happening now? I mean, why are there so many people suddenly getting into the independent space the way people understand independent?
I mean, if I were to just say it in one word, of course, I'm going to take a crack at this. I mean, it's just that you just see a lot more of them right now. They've always been around. You just see a lot more of them because of social media. If the whole scene is democratized, right? The gatekeepers have melted. You don't have those curators. You don't have those creative heads who are, who are the governors of what gets played for how long. I mean, you have your editorial heads at your streaming platforms and services and OTTs, but the fact that social media has, made the playing field very plain is one of the reasons you see a lot more of it. And people have realized, and artists have realized that they are brands and platforms unto themselves. I think that's a big thing that's happened. They've realized that there's nobody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, so that
Which is the
obviously
reason you see a lot more.
justifies. Right. So that obviously justifies why there are so many artists. But my question is, how come there's so many players trying to build a business out of it suddenly? With so many, and they're literally hardcore independent music platforms. How are we? And what makes you think that's actually picking up momentum today? Considering the fact that everyone's trying to figure out where's the money going to come from.
I think that go ahead.
No, I was just saying that because there's a lot of money to be made is the reason why I see a lot of players, right? Like that's the great. There's money. There's a lot of money. There's a reason why Bakari invested in, without having a clear ROI. It's a full-time ground for investment. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think that just both of you already touched on these things, and two things that you said, I think they'll just build upon that, which is like, one is, you mentioned the college festivals, and you just kind of see the kind of money that these guys are able to sort of get in for, just on a college level, the kind of sponsorship, and the kind of audience numbers they bring, they get for like independent music. But they all, they'll have like a sometimes they'll have a Bollywood act, but they'll also have an independent act. And then you just see the numbers and you see that, look, there is a fan following. And I think the evidence is also there. And, you talked about the democratization and the democratization of distribution sort of goes hand in hand both with social media and, streaming. The fact that streaming allows you to distribute your music, in a way that, you couldn't before. Like you mentioned, one of the reasons that these indie pop guys, became so popular was because in the physical era they were given that shelf space because of the labels and the kind of relationships they had, with the in the distribution networks. It was so hard to find an indie album in in like a Planet M or something. They were like one or two, like literally, they'd be like a 3 or 4 in entire of that thousands and thousands of catalogs that they had. So it's social media, it's streaming, and the fact that streaming has shown that there's an audience for every kind of music. I mean, and the fact that, we have been like, just if you look at it from a pure numbers and a sort of marketing and a sales angle, that how India has got so, people, why do people come here? Because even if they crack 1% of our population, they know that's like millions of people, right? So like, you as an artist, if your fan base, even if it's just a single digit percentage, that means you're actually relatively huge, right? So I think that a lot of things, you're seeing the college festivals, you're seeing the festivals themselves, like, Bacardi investing in Weekender and so many other festivals, having these big name sponsors. Why are they doing it? Because it's your youth. India has the largest youth population in the world, and music is the one way to connect with them. And today's youth have shown that, look, they love all kinds of music, right? I mean, and you're best placed to sort of see that company, because you see that every day on like at Hungama, and how of course maybe the numbers are not comparable to Bollywood, but like those numbers are still significant, and I think that's
absolutely. So, in our case, I mean, the reason why I asked the question is when we set up, Hungama Artist Allowed, for me, it was a personal intent to build something because, that's an area I understood. But because for you, when you talk about music culture, how do you see artists really adding value to your magazine? I mean, at the end of the day, even for a Rolling Stone India, I mean, Rolling Stone, of course, has always held itself as a magazine that, is of a certain stature, and it covers artists based on a certain level of, their popularity. Is music culture a magazine that looks at things like that, or are you really also looking at being, a magazine that can create popularity for talent? How have you positioned yourself?
So So Somini, it's actually a combination of both. It can't be either or. So it's a combination of both. Unless and until you have popular names in your magazine, nobody's going to touch your magazine. That's how it goes. And once you have people touch your magazine, then they'll go through people who are really talented but relatively unknown. So it's a combination of both, literally. And like the way we operate is we also have a team that curates the content in terms of what should go, what should not go. Obviously, that's how it works. And we obviously intend to create visibility. As I said in the beginning itself, the idea is to create visibility for independent talent in India. It could be from and like I defined earlier, for me, independent is typically anything which is non-film music, and that's how we typically operate. And the whole concept of music culture is to give platform and visibility to the artists who would find it difficult, given the capacity that they operate in, to reach out to a wider audience or wider readership. So yeah, I mean, to answer in a nutshell, it's a combination of both, largely.
But tell me this, I mean, you see a lot of UGC platforms today who make, totally unknown people very famous. You suddenly see, we saw that with a lot of the TikTokers, and now MX is doing it, and Instagram Reels are doing it. Do you guys ever see yourselves as a magazine really being able to create celebrities out of talent? And that's something that I'm really keen to know, because, at the end of the day, everyone's looking out for the talent creating your brand. Do you see yourself as being able to create a brand out of talent based on your, the platform that you have?
To be fair, I think Rolling Stone
Nirmika,
has the capacity
sorry.
anyway. Sorry. Okay, Nirmika, go ahead.
Yeah, please.
I don't know. Am I going first, or Deepak? You could.
Yeah. You are.
Okay. Okay. This is awkward. Okay. Since you spoke about TikTok and stuff, I take a lot of pride in saying that last year in June, we did put a TikTok star on the cover of Rolling Stone India. And that was because Faizu had a great story to tell. And I think one of the things that we've done, ever since I've joined, is also to expand the scope of the coverage of the magazine to include more pop culture icons, so people who have a story. So you don't needn't be a musician per se, right? We've put people who are, from say a cinematic background, or people who are creators, or people who are doing cutting edge stuff across the board. Even a biking influencer has made it to the cover of Rolling Stone. That's because everyone's breaking culture here, and we're looking at cultural icons more than just music icons. And look at the blurring of boundaries now, right? There are so many musicians who are now also, say, authorities in, say, street fashion, or authorities in food, or authorities in biking or auto as a sector. So there's so many. The lines are blurring, and I think our responsibility, and Amit, I know that you'd agree, and Deepak, you'd agree, our responsibility as journalists is to tell compelling stories. And although music continues to be a mainstay at Rolling Stone, and I know that it is the dream of every artist to be on the cover of Rolling Stone, and that's the one thing that I hear from artists all the time, all the email pitches and everything, that every email, every second email is talks about that. I also want people to understand, and artists more than ever to understand, that being on the cover of a magazine cannot be a goal. It just cannot be a goal, And I am from the social media generation, and I do a lot of content. I invest in my social media. I put money into my social media. But I would still say, as an artist, that, and I've said it a lot of times, so I kind of rattle it off, that likes, share, comment, subscribe, engagement cannot be your real goal as an artist. It just cannot be that. So if I were to, borrow from my little artistic, book, I would say that it's only when I had a compelling story to tell, it's only when I knew that what I was doing was coming from a right place, where I wanted to build something that was sustainable, is when I achieved, a lot of, I would say, a lot of success. I would call it success. I don't want to sound immodest here, but with also my poetry series, I realized that when it came effortlessly, and when it came from a place where I knew that this is what I was great at, and I could deliver with some conviction and passion, is when it showed, and people believed in me. So, you've got to create an audience that invests in you. And funnily, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned while I've done that, and since you mentioned, artists becoming brands is that viewers and audiences and your consumers don't connect with the art; they actually connect with the artist. So one of the videos that has that hit 1 million. Yeah, one of the videos that hit 1 million for me as an artist poet is not where I'm reciting a piece of poetry. It's where I'm talking about why I do what I do. So people love to know your story. That's the connect. That's the one piece of advice I give everyone.
Right. Yeah. So my question actually was more not so much about would you do an interview with somebody who is outside of the music industry per se? The question was more on the lines of Faizu today is. I mean, I'll give you an example. There was an event that was done for World Environment Day last year, and it was an open event done at Carter Road. There was Emiway and there was Faizu, and these were the only two people that people were ranting their names out. They were constantly just screaming out their names. So Faizu is very popular. I mean, getting Faizu on Rolling Stone is actually, it's a no-brainer. My question is that today you see a lot of unknown faces on UGC who tend to become very big. I mean, the platform makes them big, right? Because they keep coming back and they're doing stuff on the platform, and the platform takes them to a level where then someone like a Rolling Stone or someone like any other entity would want to cover them and do a story. My question was more about, can magazines become what UGC platforms are, giving a chance to nobodies to become somebody?
Actually, they've played that role. Yeah, I think historically magazines have done that. In fact, UGC platforms are becoming magazines, right? Because they've become storytelling platforms. And when you talk about unknown, names or obscure names, that's only the tip of the iceberg. They're unknown till everyone knows about them, right? I mean, whether it's Faizu or the bunch of people, I work personally with also, in my creative collaborations. It's only till you realize, right? And also understand we come from a place of privilege where we are consuming a certain kind of content. I wasn't familiar with the TikTok world till say 2 years ago. And that was too late in the day for the millions of, youth that were already following it. Yeah. So before Faizu, there was Danish Zehen, who was such a big phenomenon. I remember my good friend who's not with us anymore, Samir, showing me a video of Danish 3 years ago. And I didn't know that this world existed, that there were people who didn't really have a primary craft, but they were awesome at whatever they did. I remember seeing a video of Danish at Ghatkopar railway station. I didn't know what he did, but he was just huge. But I was late to the party. This was already going on for a very long time. So for a lot of people, TikTok today is a thing that they're discovering. But that's our problem. That's the tip of the iceberg that we represent.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that to answer your question, I just wanted to add, Rolling Stone, like Nirmika said, I think when you're talking about, your question is essentially, can magazines make artists, right? Now, I think you have to look at historically the place we are in today. Like she said, that has happened, and Rolling Stone in the US actually did that in the 1960s and 70s, right? Because those were the mediums of communication. Those were the way that you could, because how did artists reach out to their fan bases? There were different avenues at that time, right? So if my only traditional means, of finding about these artists were like these gatekeepers, and magazines were those gatekeepers. Today, magazines aren't the gatekeepers. The press and journalists aren't the gatekeepers. Like we said, social media, the fan base, the artists have got the ability to sort of connect directly with their fans, and I think that's why UGC platforms essentially are about leveraging your fan base to essentially basically spread your message through. And UGC and social media, they do pretty much the same thing, right? The press actually today is tracking trends. We're not making trends.
Yeah.
Our job has become to observe and be quick to sort of be on the ball when it comes to sort of are we putting this guy on the cover after everybody has, or are we putting him when he's just about becoming hot, and are we sort of observe? That's become our job now, because because while we do write all about the upcoming acts that we love, are we helping breaking them? I'm not so sure at the level that maybe we could do at a time when all these these different avenues were not available.
Right. No, I mean, it's interesting because, when we were running music channels, we were always struggling between who's going to get that exclusive bug first. Now it's so tough to catch on and hold on, or even, be the first, because somebody has always got it before you. So I can imagine. I mean, that's a side of the business that one never even thought of. I mean, you guys are living it, so you obviously understand the challenges. Uh, I want to ask. I want to actually kind of steer away from what was and what is right now. Right? We've been seeing the last 6, 7 months being extremely challenging. And the I think the one entity that has been so badly hit by it is the independent artist. And you had different, categories of independent artists. You had these artists who were performing in restaurants. You had these artists who were depending on weddings, and they were going and doing festivals. And it's crazy how one scenario has just killed everything around. Like I think I had shared with you guys that, in the UK, they're talking about almost 60% of the musicians planning to change their careers and become. What's your take on that? I mean, just want to hear if you have, what's been your experience?
Nirmika, do you wanna
I mean, I'm a music journalist who and an artist who's had two careers all my life. So I never gave up my primary job. I'm an artist who always believed that I had a job that I had to stick with because I needed the money. It's as plain and simple. I came to Bombay without any backing. I needed the money to survive as an artist. And I know I
Right.
continue to do that, right? And also because my primary job is an awesome job that I absolutely love. And now I feel a certain responsibility in continuing to be, in the space that I am and to build on it. But my advice to any artist right now who's struggling, it's a time to survive. There is no pride, there is no ego, that should be, there shouldn't be any ego that should prevent you from, even picking up, say, a second or a third job just to survive. I've done it all my life. I'm the biggest supporter of having 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs, as many jobs. There will never be a perfect time for you to be a perfect artist. If you think that you're going to give up that primary job, maybe resign yourself to some beautiful, scenic, creative den where you can create. That's not going to happen. Some of your best creations are going to happen or come, at times of chaos and disorder. That's how it's been for me, and I think that a lot of artists will resonate with this feeling. And I believe in what Gary Vee says, which is that hold on to whatever lets you fuel your passion. You need money, you need that hard cash, and if you can do that, why not?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that, like we were talking about earlier about the definition of independent, I don't think the term selling out even exists anymore, right? So when you talk about artists doing whatever they want to do to make their money and to earn their bread,
Right.
I don't think that anybody in today's scenario is going to question an artist who's doing something that, which otherwise would seem maybe uncool or like supposedly inauthentic. And you talked about the UK statistic, and it's alarming because there they actually get government subsidies to help them survive.
Yeah.
And they're debating about how they've reduced the government subsidy and how, but it was. You looked at those figures and it was like, wow, they're actually sort of compensating almost their entire income, and now they've reduced it,
Yeah.
so they're up in arms, and we get nothing. Like the arts industry is like the lowest, like in the in the sort of pecking order. Like nowhere. So like, for indie artists, like where can they go? And like, forget indie artists, when you talk about like the guys who used to work, the crew members who used to work on these, what they must be
Yeah.
going through. And we've seen a lot of great initiatives.
Yeah.
But I think that also one
Yeah.
of the advantages we have is also our little cultural background. Like I know so many artists who used to live in Bombay on rent on their own, who moved back home to their sort of native places, as they call them, to stay back with their parents, because that's the only way. Like there's no point paying rent here when you can work from home anyway. Luckily, you can make music at home, especially if you're like a
Right.
singer, songwriter, or whatever. It's relatively easier. And I think that like artists have been really impressive in the way that they have just tried to reconfigure themselves. So many of them have started online classes. So many of them have
Right.
are doing workshops. They've been trying to do live streams. Again, that space is a bit murky because the ticketing, like it's just about starting, and like
Yeah.
even the money and the experience is nowhere close to the real thing. But like the fact is that everybody's trying, and everybody's trying to do what they want, like trying their best to do what they do. And like
Right.
I think that like if I had to give any artist like any sort of advice, and I'm not being an artist myself, I feel kind of like I don't know whether it's my place to do that, but like it's just that, like Nirmika said, do what you have to do to sort of earn your money. Nobody's going to judge you, because at this point in time, But like, and there's so many things that you can tell artists to do. Like you can tell them, try and release as much music as you can, dig into your song bank. And I have actually said these things to artists, and I've said these things,
Right.
like these are things you can do, but you don't have to do
Yeah.
them. You don't have to be on social media every day to connect with your fans, because just make sure that you still maintain that relationship in the absence of gigs. You don't have to collaborate if you don't feel like it. You don't even
Right.
have to write, you don't have to record, but all you need to do is take this time to hone your craft, become the best musician that you can possibly be, because now is the time where you're not necessarily in the public eye. Just work on your craft every day.
That's an amazing tip, Amit. That's an amazing tip. I mean, I think that's gold, because artists need to, especially the ones who were supposedly very busy in the good old days. This is the time where you hear a lot of artists saying, "Oh, I'm so busy traveling, I don't land up getting time to do riyaz." This is the time to do it.
This is the time to add to that and have somebody who is almost like your editor. And that's the other piece of advice that I'd give them, to have a close friend who you trust, give you objective viewpoints. Because as a creative person, I mean, I know being a creative person, maybe not a musician, but like you get so self-absorbed, and like at this point in time, you're literally by circumstances, you are forced to be self-absorbed because you're sort of confined. But so it's important to have another voice who will give you an honest opinion and say, you know what, this works, this doesn't work, or or to me this sounds like this, and because whose opinion you trust, because that's so important to also have, because you can get too close to your art as well, because ultimately that music is going to go out somewhere, and
Yeah. So Deepak, tell me this: you, besides having a magazine, have also been managing a few artists over the years. What would you suggest? I mean, if you were managing an artist at this point, considering whatever is happening with the whole pandemic, and nobody knows when things are going to come back. Of course, we're seeing. I've heard YouTube Fan Fest is happening on the 11th of October, and there are artists who are coming in performing there. So, how do you, as somebody who's a manager, what would you advise the artist? Hi, Deepak. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I just missed certainly a bit of the question.
Yeah. No. So I was basically asking that, if as a manager, what would you advise an artist, in the times that we are in right now?
Okay. So first thing is, I think Amit also mentioned this. This is a time to reflect upon oneself. Firstly, you have a lot of time at hand to understand what you want to do more and what better you want to do. So some of the artists that I have had my discussions with, the discussions have been on the line of what has. So we have typically done SWOT analysis with the artist of what has worked, what has not worked, what is your strength area, what is how your positioning has to be. So a lot of aspects have been discussed, which do not always focus on music, but they also focus on business of music. This is a time when you can actually reflect upon them, because in the thick of things, a lot of things go amiss, and it's very important for an artist to also position himself or herself rightly. And when you are actually making music, when you are actually doing stuff, then you are not able to focus on what exactly needs to be done. So like I said, we did a lot of SWOT analysis with our artists, and we identified that over a period of time, there are certain things that have worked for you, certain things that have not worked for you, and to set up clear directions of how your work should go ahead in the coming times, once things start opening up. Like Amit said, it's very important for somebody to tell an artist all these things, because as an artist, you somehow are very attached to your craft, and you're very attached to the product that you're creating, and there has to be an external opinion about and it has to be a very objective opinion. It can't be biased just to please somebody. If you are really a true friend of an artist and true artist manager, it has to be unbiased, it has to be on the point. So for us, what we have done is we have actually worked on all these things beyond music, of course, and music is something that always keeps going on. But the business of music is something that we have really focused on in these 3 months, of how you need to go ahead when things start moving ahead. See,
So I think in one sense we are saying that, if we are talking about the independent content space for tomorrow, which could be for even, I know comedy has picked up, and, today even on a Book My Show, people are buying tickets for comedy shows, and like today I landed up seeing the Rambo Circus on Book My Show, and I thought it was beautifully done.
Wow.
But music isn't selling, unfortunately. People are not buying tickets for music, so there obviously has to be some, I don't know, some unique approach thought of and figured out. And I think between the three of you, what you all have said is very relevant, that it's time for you to look at what other strengths do you have, and while music can continue to be in your life. I think, Nirmika, you've set a brilliant example on how you keep yourself having a day job while you're honing your talent. And I think, Amit, you being a freelance journalist, you have found ways to keep your career afloat, and not so dependent, because some of the hyper local magazines that you were writing for, especially I remember things like Time Out and all, in the current 6 months, I'm sure they would have had nothing to write about because nothing is happening.
But they don't exist anymore, most of them, all of them.
No, I'm just saying, yeah. But I'm saying if they were now, they would have definitely shut down, because what would you write about, So I think we've managed to really speak a lot about, and I'm sure we can continue to talk about this. But I would just want to end this session by asking each one of you, what does "make it myself" mean to you when you hear that term? What is it that you feel it really stands for? Nirmika.
Make it myself to me means that I must realize that as an artist, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a creative entrepreneur, which means I should take risks, and which means that I should invest in my business. The one thing that I don't realize is that themselves. So one piece of advice that I'll give to people struggling with monetizing, their music. I know that there's a sort of live fatigue, and live music is not, beautifully experienced via virtual platforms at all, even if it's live and played live. Invest in your social media. There are a lot of brands that are investing in influencer marketing, or that could be a source of revenue that could come your way. So if you were, say, a business person, and you know that you're doing music because you're passionate about it, you want to make it a career, and that can't happen with a sense of entitlement. I see a lot of artists, filmmakers or musicians or even comedians having a sense of entitlement. Indie है तो लोग मुझको सुनो. किसने बोला ये? कोई भी country में ऐसा नहीं होता है formula. India में indie है तो हमको सुनो भाई. That cannot happen, right? Are you investing in the right kind of talent? Are you investing in the right kind of creative capital? Are you ensuring that your audience is getting wider by the day or not? So that's the one thing that people invest in it. If you're not investing in sort of passion and it, your numbers are not going to drive themselves. So invest that 500 rupees a week, invest say 2,000 rupees a month, and do that because you'll see the difference. It's akin to you, say, advertising in a paper or just capturing eyeballs. It's just that, and that does not mean selling your soul. That does not mean buying likes. That does not mean, buying followers. All of that is a load of BS. I think a lot of people are confused. There is a lot of misconception. A lot of people, when they boost their posts, think that they're buying likes and followers. It's not that. It's just that the metric is, now quantifiable, right? Back in the day, if you put a billboard and people saw it and the eyeballs was the metric, right now the numbers and the views are the metrics. So please invest in it. I know that, as a Rolling Stone, platform, and as Rolling Stone, the brand, that also invests in a lot of brand-sponsored artistic activities. I know there's money to be made here as artists. So invest in your social media. Make sure that you have at least, all of the artists, at least a 10K followership. So, on Instagram or wherever, so you can have a swipe up. And all of these things, they might sound very small, but they go a long, long way in positioning yourself. Ensure there's a creative vision, be consistent, be committed, and be very creative. That's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Amazing. I think you beautifully put it, and it comes. We can see that it's coming out of your heart, because you're putting this to test and you're actually applying it to yourself. So it's not just words that you're telling other artists to do. Brilliantly put, Nirmika. Amit, please, what does "make it myself" stand in your head?
To me personally, I think something like "make it myself" essentially means I think I've been doing it anyway, which is sort of like just being, I think, doing things your way. I mean, even if it's not necessarily the popular way, and sort of being authentic and true to yourself. You mentioned my social media and the stuff I put up on Twitter. I know that I'm sure I rub people the wrong way because of my honest opinions, but like nobody's saying it. If nobody's going to say it, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to say it because as a journalist, I feel that it is my responsibility to sort of like, I sort of talk about these things. And, I think that it also sort of like, I mean, I just speak from the perspective of a journalist. I mean, the idea of being a journalist and being objective means that you sort of like, it means that you only don't write about the good stuff. You write about everything.
Absolutely.
You write about all aspects of things. And I think that sadly in creative spaces, especially when it comes to like sort of creative industries, because it's such a, personas are involved rather than products, that becomes really difficult to do. But I think that it's important, because ultimately, journalists are, as they call us the fourth estate. I mean, I think we've lost a lot of credibility. I think that we have to sort of like make sure that, that you stay true to what, to what you stand for. And you can't have like you can't be two-faced. If you want to make it yourself, you've got to be.
Yeah. I think, Amit, the way you put your thoughts across, why I believe that it's the way to go, because like Nirmika said, there's a lot of BS happening out there. Somebody needs to call a spade, and if it doesn't come, if it's not communicated in a straight jacketed manner, it's not going to be noticed, and that's what's required. I think so. Keep going. Don't change the methods. And Deepak, what does make it myself stand for you? Deepak, hi, Deepak, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you?
So I was saying, what does make it myself stand for you? The term "make it myself."
See, the benefit of speaking the last is that people before you have already summed it up, so you don't have to really add much. And Nirmika and Amit have already said very specific and very very nice things. For me, make it myself is very simple. I mean, as an artist, as a musician, what I would want to say about this make it myself is that you are a startup, you are an entrepreneur. You have if you don't think you want to invest in yourself, then there is very less likelihood that somebody else would want to invest in you. So take
Right.
control in your hands and make your own content, be independent, and the results will come. If your content is right, there will be people coming up to you and helping you out. And so make it myself for me essentially is about owning and moving forward.
Right. I think to also kind of put it in a nutshell, artists need to look at their careers beyond just live shows. They need to find new avenues, and it does involve doing SWOT analysis. It does involve self-investment. It also, most importantly, involves to understand that you are a businessman when you say you want to be an artist, because somebody will invest in you only when they see you as somebody worth investing in. So it's all a vicious circle. So I want to thank each one of you for being here tonight. I know network tends to really trouble us, but each one of you have played such a big role in sharing a lot of amazing ideas. Thank you so much, and I hope to catch up with you guys again.
Thanks so much
Thank
for
you. Thank you for calling us here.
Good night. Bye.
Good night. Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.